So what inspired you to become an artist, and how did you get started?
Well, it's always been pretty much a part of me as far as what inspired me to become an artist. My mother was an artist, and growing up, my father was a military doctor, so we traveled all over the place. And it was my mother and a visit to the Prado when I was a child and seeing all of those magnificent paintings. And I think what made me become interested in fiber art was because in so many of the paintings, you had this massive amount of fabric painted into so many of the paintings, and fabric coming out of the ceilings, it seemed, and men on horseback with fabric flowing behind them, and then of course the flamenco dancers. So that's what inspired me. What inspired my art style? I get inspiration everywhere. It could be walking through an airport. It could be gardening in the front yard, seeing a flower, seeing the different color combinations. That's pretty much where I get my inspiration. Sometimes before I fall asleep, an idea will just come to me and I'm like, oh, that's great. That's really great. And it just comes out of nowhere, really. That's an interesting one, my creative process from idea to execution. And it's like I said, I get my ideas. It could be, for example, the film dress I have at the Peoria Riverfront Museum right now. It's like a tutu that a ballerina would wear. And I got, for example, the inspiration for that from a little jewelry box I had as a child that had a ballerina on it that would twirl around. But also at the same time, I was reading books about Native Americans, Crazy Horse, for example, and the battles, the Fetterman Massacre, and the different battles with the Native Americans, and also with the Civil War. So you'll notice, if you look at that dress, a lot of the film strips have to do with Native Americans, and they have to do with the Civil War. There are several of Abraham Lincoln. If you hone in, you'll see little images of Abraham Lincoln. So that dress, along with the jewelry box and everything I was reading at the time, I was very concerned about treaties during battle and the lies that were told in the treaties that were broken. That's what that dress has to do with. And so I called it Dancing Around Words, sort of a play on words, you're not really telling the truth. So that's one example. Oh, I think one of the biggest challenges I face as an artist, or I faced when I was coming along, everybody telling me I couldn't do it. Everyone telling me you'll never make a living. You can't make a living doing art. You have to have another job. That was disheartening, and that was hard to hear.
To you?
Well, the film strip dresses were very memorable. The daughter of the owner of a film strip company in this country contacted me because the family had a bunch of vintage film strips. So they wanted to know if I wanted to make some dresses out of the film strips. So I did, and there were 4 dresses. One, of course, was the Dancing Around Words, the tutu dress. And I made a headpiece, too. And that was memorable for many reasons, just because I was using a different medium than classical fiber, like wool or silk or cotton. This was taking actual film strips and manipulating them and making them into kind of a sculpture, dress, fiber art kind of thing. So those are really interesting pieces, and they straddle that dividing line between adornment and sculpture. But yet they're really not wearable, but yet they are, and they can actually be worn. So yeah, that was a memorable grouping to do, and I had a solo show at the Peoria Art Guild, which was really nice. And of course, one of the pieces now is at the Peoria Riverfront Museum. And actually, that piece is sold to a place in Hollywood. So we're just waiting for that to go there.
How do you balance the business side of being an artist?
Well, for me, one of the best things was becoming the house director for my old sorority at Bradley University, Chi Omega sorority. And this has been a wonderful job as kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of a safety net. When you sell art, you know, you might sell a lot and then you don't sell. So to have steady income coming in, for me, it was a wonderful thing. And I have a place to live, I have food to eat, I'm around wonderful young people all the time. And so that was a perfect job. I think it would be a lot harder if I were having to work a 9 to 5, where I'm at the grind all day long and then have creative energy left over to create things. So for an artist to do this kind of a thing where you're a house mom or a house director has been just a wonderful blending of two worlds.
What advice would you give to inspiring artists or fiber artists?
I would tell them to believe in yourself, and if you have a passion and a dream, to follow it. Don't let anybody tell you no, but also be realistic. You're going to have to look at options. When you look at artists, what is it, like 1%, like the Andy Warhols, make it, you know, it's difficult. But they're creative ways of working around things and making it work. So at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, what I have to say is believe in yourself, and if it's your passion, you follow it, and you do everything you can in your power to make that work. Oh, knitting, I'll tell you what, knitting is like my passion. And again, it was living in Spain when I was a little girl. And this is what really got me interested in fiber art. We were traveling, I think it was to Talavera, and they make pottery, beautiful, beautiful pottery. And we stopped at this old castle, and we spent the night there. And we were leaving the next morning, and when we were outside, I noticed these little old ladies, and they were knitting. And they were knitting the most beautiful lace. And they weren't even looking at what they were doing. You know, they were having a conversation and they were talking to, you know, the different people. But yet it was like their hands knew what to do. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. And this beautiful lace coming off. And that to me was like magic. And I remember thinking, I want to know how to do that. And something just turned on. So between that and the Prado and all the color and all the art and everything, so it all just kind of came together. And knitting is my go-to place. It's the most therapeutic thing. It's relaxing. I can fly. I can go somewhere else. And like you said, I have the hats. They're just colorful and they're fun. I love seeing color go through my hands. I love working with pattern. I love making socks. I don't think I have any of the socks on the website, but I have some really intricate socks where I take different knitting styles, like, for example, from Estonia and from Portugal and from South America, and try to combine everything into one piece and make it work. I love doing that, and I love the history behind the knitting. Knitting a lot of times can tell a story, like with the chulo hats from South America. A lot of times different symbols are knitted in, and it's a way of communicating certain things, maybe about the wearer, the owner, or the piece for whom it was intended. So yeah, it's for me too, it's a way to explore history and to learn more about the country and how textiles and fiber art play a role in that country. You know, and it's like, I did a presentation for the Peoria Riverfront Museum during, I think it was called Virtual Artist, and I was talking about fiber art and how during the Renaissance, how fiber art was the premier art. It wasn't the paintings. You know, everybody thinks it's the paintings. It wasn't the paintings, it was the fiber art. In fact, there was a real competition between Raphael and Michelangelo. They didn't like each other. And Michelangelo was painting the ceiling at the Sistine Chapel, but Raphael was responsible for the tapestries that hung in the chapel, and the tapestries were more magnificent. And we never hear about that. So I like to educate people about little things like that.